Welcome back to the Chasing Happiness podcast, an honest podcast about finding happiness, what it really means, and the process of getting there. My name is Crystal, and today I'm talking to Lou Mongello. For those of you who don't know Lou, I'll give you a bit of a brief introduction. Lou is a lawyer, or former lawyer, who turned what he loved into what he does. He is a best-selling author, a podcaster, a public speaker, a business mentor, and so many more things that I can't even put them all into words. Lou created WDW Radio, which has now become WDW Clubhouse, around his love for Walt Disney. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Clubhouse, you will learn a little bit more about it during my conversation with Lou. But the thing that I think is really important here is Lou turned what he loved into what he does, and he's now helping other people do the same. So for those of you that have listened to the podcast for a while now, you'll know the Chasing Happiness podcast would not exist without Lou Mongello. This is a medium of conversation that I never would have chosen to do on my own. And it was with the help and support of Lou Mongello that I made this leap, quite literally, which we will talk about a little bit later in my conversation with him. I wouldn't be here recording this podcast episode without him today, and I am honored and thrilled to be able to call him a friend. He is one of the kindest, most helpful people you will ever meet. He is the kind of guy that would give you the shirt off of his back. I'm honored to be able to call him a friend and a mentor, and I hope you guys enjoy the conversation that we had today. So thank you very much, Lou, for joining me today here on the Chasing Happiness podcast. For people who aren't familiar with WDW Radio or you as an entrepreneur or a business mentor, can you give a brief description sort of what you do? Because there's a lot of stuff in there.
Well, you know me too. You're like, Lou, keep it brief, please. We don't have a lot of time. Super condensed version. Was a lawyer in New Jersey, wrote a book about Disney World, started podcasting in 2005, took the massive leap of faith and said, look, I think I can figure out a way to turn this into a business. Sold everything, moved to Florida, and gave it a shot because, I was fearful of the regret if I wouldn't have done it. And I think there's a fine line between insanity and, and leaps of faith. And unfortunately, knock on wood, it worked out. And I'm super happy being able to do what I do on the Disney side and then try and also help people turn what they love into what they do too.
Which is the whole reason the Chasing Happiness podcast exists, because for those who haven't been listening since the very beginning, back in 2016, I would not have started Chasing Happiness, the podcast, or probably Chasing Happiness, the business, without Lou Mongello. I went to your very first Momentum weekend in 2016, and during a workshop on the Monday morning, you, as well as the other handful of people in our very intimate group, said, your voice needs to be out there. People need to hear you talk. And it terrified me at the time. I couldn't even fathom why people would want to listen to me talk. And I have to tell you, it has become one of the highlights of every part of my day, every part of my week. Whether it's people contacting me to say they listened to an episode, whether it's me contacting people like you to say, hey, do you want to hop on and have a conversation? This podcast and that suggestion from you has literally changed my life. So thank you for that.
Well, I think you would have found this path on your own anyway, but I am so happy and so I'm getting choked up because I've known you for so long, and I'm happy that you did it because I love everything about you. Your why is so, it's just everything you do is from such a good place. And I think you're helping yourself and you're helping a lot of other people too.
Thank you for that, Lou. You're going to make me cry too. We are not going to cry on today's podcast.
Crying is podcast gold. Keep it in. Don't edit that out.
So for people who really aren't that familiar with WDW Radio, because Disney is sort of what started you on your path to entrepreneurship. It's what made you make the leap and leave the big city and head down south. And it literally has become, I want to say, just a part of your blood and your soul, because pretty much everything you do is Disney-fied in some way, shape, or form. What was it about Disney that drew you?
So 3 weeks after Walt Disney World opened in November of 71, my parents literally threw us into the back of the family truckster like the Griswolds, and we drove down. And to say something is a life-changing experience, it was, because we started to go down every year, sometimes more than once. And there's a few things about it, Crystal. It was this place that I went away with my family, and we just had such amazing, wonderful vacations from the trip down to our time there. And there was something that fascinated me about this place. Like, what was it that kept on drawing us to go back? It wasn't the rides, it wasn't the shows, it wasn't the food, but there was something else. There was something intangible. And I really wanted to learn all about it, never expecting that the idea to write the book I wanted to read, which was a trivia book back in 2003, would be that sort of seminal and pivotal moment for me that would lead me down a path that I never could have anticipated otherwise.
The trivia book is actually a great thing for you to touch on because you were a very busy lawyer at the time that you wrote the trivia book. And because I am able to call you a friend and I have known you as long as I do, I know that you wrote this book in the middle of the night while your family was sleeping, while you should have probably been getting some sleep yourself. What about that was calling to you at such a visceral level that you were willing to sacrifice other things to be able to get that done?
So I think I've always had a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit in me, and I never really knew it. Hindsight being 2020, because remember, entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur now is the cool buzzwordy thing to do. Right. Being an entrepreneur a long time ago meant you were unemployed, right? That was
very true.
But I didn't realize that my parents were entrepreneurs because they always had a side gig. My dad was a lawyer, and he and my mom, ran my uncle's medical facility and had a medical imaging center, but they had an antique store and a bagel store and all these like different things. And so I was learning, along the way and didn't realize it. And so for me, I was practicing law. I had this IT consulting company on the side, which meant, all day from 7 o'clock in the morning till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, I was in court, seeing clients, developing websites, doing whatever. And because I was always in the service business, I had this idea of making a product and reselling it. I think I watched a lot of infomercials late at night because that's all it was on. And I said, I want to write a book. And I wasn't honestly smart enough to write about law or computers. And as I said, I wrote the book that I wanted to read. I've always been fascinated by the details and the minutia and the stories of Disney, and there was no trivia book out there. So, Crystal, my only goal and the only personal challenge I set out for myself was, can I write a book and can I get it published? Because in 2003, self-publishing didn't really exist. Right. Can I sort of see it on Amazon? Can I see it on, a Barnes & Noble bookstore? Kids, you can Google what Barnes & Noble used to be. and that was it. And I thought that was going to be the end of the road for me.
And it turned out that absolutely was not the end of the road for you. In fact, that was probably the beginning of your wonderful WDW radio box community, which is now the Clubhouse. So can you explain really quickly to people sort of how the community formed around the book, if you can?
So very quickly, again, I started with the book, and then I started writing articles, and I started a discussion forum, because again, this was pre-social media, 2004. So I had a discussion forum on my site, which was a very eye-opening, fascinating experience to me, that there were other dorks like me sitting in their basement that loved Disney as much as I did. And in 2005, when I heard about this new technology called podcasting, I asked Jeeves what it was because I didn't know, but I knew the power of the spoken word would be far more powerful than anything that I could write. So I started podcasting at a very much in the medium's infancy, but everything that I was doing was a one-way push conversation, right? You put out a blog post, you put out an article, you put out a podcast, and then we wait. And then we wait for that response. And when I started to see, because I've always been a bit of a tech nerd, when I started to see that live video streaming was becoming relatively accessible, this was really a game changer for me, not because I wanted people to see me or I have to make myself pretty for the camera, but because all of a sudden it was that two-way conversation. And community has always been at the heart of what I do, whether it began with the first email I ever received or book I ever received or person that joined in the discussion forum. Community has very much been at the heart and soul of what I do. So now being able to create content where you, my friend, the viewer, is sort of in my home with me, it's a much more personal, interactive, real-time experience where you have a vested interest and can help direct the conversation. Podcasting is the core of what I do, but man, I love live video specifically for the community building aspect that it creates.
And for those who haven't been to one of Lou's Wednesday night live chats within Clubhouse, it 100% is more than just a community. You go, and sometimes maybe you haven't checked in or you haven't seen a live chat taking place live for a couple of weeks, and people will message you and say, how are you? I miss you. What's new? What's going on? Oh, don't forget, Lou mentioned this last week. You might not have seen it. There is a group of people who, especially this year, I cannot say enough good things about the community, because I've gotten mail from people this year who I met on the cruise that Lou did a cruise in February. For those who didn't listen to my podcast about it back in February, just before COVID hit, we were on a cruise out of New Orleans, a Walt Disney World cruise. And there were people that I met on that cruise who have sent me postcards, have sent me Christmas ornaments, who have reached out to me since that cruise, and I had never met them before. We certainly are not, calling each other every day, but just this reminder that there's someone else out there in a different country that is thinking about you today is such a wonderful feeling. So thank you, Lou, for giving us a place to be able to connect like that. And for everybody who's listening, if you haven't checked it out, please do so. Speaking of which, Lou, do you want to tell people how they can find you?
So first and foremost, I love that story because it's also not just because I'm happy for you, but it's representative of similar stories. And the credit goes not to me. You know that. It goes to, look, I say all the time, I built the Clubhouse, but you are the ones who populate it. And I think we become magnets for the kind of people we want to attract. I've never placed an ad. I've never tried to bribe somebody like, oh, join the community and get this free thing, because I want people to be there for the right reason. So, I never worry about being the EST, right? The biggest, the best, the whatever. I care more about the people who are in there. And it's remarkable what you as a community have done and built. And for me to be able to pay witness to that is truly been a blessing to watch those friendships and relationships form. Well, and I forget what your question was because I had to just...
That's perfectly fine. Do you want to tell people who aren't familiar where they can find you and they can start to become a part of the Clubhouse or the community?
So everything I do on the Disney side of things is at wdwradio.com, and there you'll find a link to the community and the different ways you could be part of the community. And then everything else that I do sort of on the business and entrepreneurial side is at loumongello.com.
Perfect. And I will put links in the show notes for everybody who's listening to the podcast so that you can check it out. But since we did talk about the entrepreneur side of things, Mr. Mongello, I think it's relatively important, especially as part of this podcast, for me to mention you're not just trying to help people become entrepreneurs. You literally are trying to help people find their purpose in life, the reason why they're here, and how they can go about turning that into a life for themselves. So can you tell everybody who's listening why you decided that that was an important part of your journey?
Again, if you would have asked me years ago, like, so what's your business plan going forward? Lay it out for me. None of these things would have been on it, right? I have no training. I have no expertise other than it's just the journey that I've been on. And as somebody who loves, I remember conferences. When I used to love to attend conferences and then start speaking to conferences, I found that my story and the things that I had done was helpful to people. And, honestly, I would and continue to hear stories of people who they get up and they complain, oh, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate going to work, but I can't wait to go home and work on this thing. Well, I think one, life is too short, and two, we have the tools and opportunity to take that thing that you love to turn it into what you do, because you should not have to get up every day not looking forward to what you want to do. Again, that was my fear, that 5, 10, 20 years would have gone by. I wouldn't have given this a shot. And then all of a sudden it's too late. So I do want to try and help people. And I want to show that, look, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Again, the gatekeepers to a certain degree are not there the way they used to be. And it is possible. And I want to help people along the way, whether it's with, training or support or accountability or a combination of all those things, because they're critical, especially as you're first starting out.
They're hugely critical. And I think it's really important for everybody who's listening to rewind, go back 50 seconds or so in the podcast and listen to exactly what Lou says. It's not just about saying, I've been there and I've done this, but it's about saying, there are other people who can help you with advice. They can give you something that maybe you didn't know you need, or they can point you in the direction of what your next step is going to be, even though you don't see that in front of you yet. And you've done a really great job at creating this community. And I cannot even really put into words how important the Hub community has been, which is the community of people who have gone to Lou's entrepreneur events. And we've all sort of banded together to help each other with silly little questions, from everything like, I have this accounting problem, to I tried to do this live chat today and this thing went wrong. People who don't even know you in this community, who have not met you, stand up and say, hey, I can help with this. And again, we're back to that. It's about connecting with people. It's about creating the connections that matter, that help move you forward. So for everybody who's listening, I know you guys hear me preach it quite often, but it is never too late for you to try the thing that makes you happy, for you to try something different in life that you think is going to make you feel fulfilled. And Lou does a great job at doing that. So definitely check out his website. One of the things I do want to ask you though, Lou, while I have you here, is this year has been, I hate using the word difficult because it almost just doesn't seem fitting, but this year has been difficult for a lot of people. I know for you personally, it has been more than difficult. It's been very emotional. I wonder if you can speak not just to how the year has changed you, but maybe even sort of what lessons you've learned amidst everything that has happened this year.
So I'm smiling because as I sort of look back in hindsight and look, you know, I try and look back on 2020 and you know, and laugh as much as I can, understanding full well that it's been extraordinarily difficult, possibly for you who's listening. And to quickly go back to something that you were talking about in terms of on the business side, people have to remember too, Crystal, that they're not alone. Whether you don't have family, you don't have friends, people don't get it. Like things that you do, like me, there's other people out there that want to help you. And just always remember that you are never, ever alone. And it's in terms of 2020, look, I'm a firm believer of not necessarily having all of your eggs in one basket, right? So I have and I think you've seen it, Momentum. I've sort of shown this diagram of what my business looks like. And there's a lot of hubs and spokes and things that come off of it because I like to be diverse. I like to always be working on what's next. So, you know, on the Disney side, well, Disney World closes and they stop making movies. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine because I have all my stuff on the business side. And all of a sudden there's no more conferences and people don't have money to spend. And then my mom dies. And I'm like, it's you know, like not to use the dead mom thing as an excuse, but look, I still, you know, I approach it with a smile and I will always make lemonade from lemons. And I'm like, because I believe that there's always opportunity to be found in adversity, right? And how we approach it and how we deal with it is critical. And look, you know, when this all started and COVID continues to be scary, sure, there was a couple of weeks that I was on the couch eating Doritos, like, what do I do? You know, but then it's like, hey, you've got, like I look at it this way, like we had the blessing of the one thing we complained that nobody had enough of, which is time.
Right.
Like, wait a minute. I literally cannot go anywhere. I'm not distracted by all these things. What am I going to do with it? Right? How am I going to take that time? So I have my whiteboard with all my ideas that have sat on there for years. I'm like, I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to get one of those big projects off there. And please understand, when I say that I use it to write and self-publish a book, it has nothing to do with me. I say that because I wanted to do this not just for myself, but so other people could see, hey, this is how you can leverage the time too. And reach out to me and say, well, how do I do it? How do I write the book? How do I publish the book? How do I get a designer? Because it is possible to be done. And having that project to work on distracted you from all the nonsense outside. And then when it's done, when you've got this thing in your hands and you're just like, I made this. Like there's such a rewarding feeling. It has nothing to do with the numbers of books that you've sold. It's that you did it. Like you set out that challenge for yourself and you were able to. There's a huge nexus between all the people that say, I'm going to write a book someday, and the number of people that actually do.
Right. And I can't imagine that it's being someone who has never actually attempted to write a book at this point in my life so far. Yet. I can't imagine it's an easy task, even amidst everything that has happened this year, to say, okay, I'm going to devote an hour a day, and here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I'm going to write, because it's been such a crazy, chaotic year, and there's been so much noise. So how did you try to find the focus to be able to do that?
So again, this has sort of been sitting out there like for a long time, and I would work on a little bit here, a little there, take a step forward, and then forget about it for a while. I literally was like, okay, I'm doing this. And I put a date, and I tell people this all the time. Like I practice what I preach. I wrote a date down on a piece of paper and I stuck it on the wall in front of me. And I'm like, you need to have your manuscript done by that date, because I know it's going to take X amount of time to get it done. And I did. And at some point I said, okay, you know what? This weekend, I am doing nothing but locking myself in the room. And if it means getting up a half hour early or staying up a couple hours late, or not binge watching Lost or Game of Thrones for the 18th time, then do it. Like if it matters to you, you need to find and make the time. And I get that we have work and family and other obligations, a little extra pot of coffee or tea or whatever it is that's going to keep you up. Because once you start that process, and it's not to sort of throw the momentum word out there, but it's true. Like momentum is an incredibly powerful thing, and you don't have to eat the whole elephant. Right? It's just, I'm going to get 500 words done a day. I'm going to get this many words. I'm going to get a chapter done this week. You'll be surprised how quickly that thing that you want to do gets done.
Absolutely. And for those who are listening, for each one of you who is tuned into everything that Lou is saying right now, you'll know that a couple of seconds ago he said he practices what he preaches. And for those who don't know him personally, I just want to say, he is not giving you lip service. This is a man who, when he said he wanted to start live video and he thought everyone should start live video, took a laptop with him to the Disney parks and carried the dang thing and a battery pack around the park to show people what live video really was. So if you're sitting at home right now and you think to yourself, I don't even know where to begin, Lou's absolutely right. It's one small step. Maybe today it's you pick the date, and tomorrow it's you write one page, and the next day it's another page. Or if what you're trying to do is build a business, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day towards the goal that you're reaching for is absolutely doable for everyone. There's a podcast episode that you can go back and listen to that talks about we all have the same 165 hours. If you sit down and figure out where you're spending that time. Complete honesty, I have spent a whole Saturday Netflixing something that I've seen before for some reason. We all do it, and it's okay to do it once in a while. But if you have this thing that is calling to you, find a way to work it into your schedule. Find the time, because it matters.
With that, and having somebody to help keep you accountable is important too, if you can find it.
100%. I cannot agree with that more, Lou. And I think part of the reason why that's so important for me personally is you're down in Florida. I'm up here in Southern Ontario. We are hours apart from each other on a flight. But I can tell you, when I'm having a struggle of some sort, I know at some point I'm going to get together with you, or I'm going to be on a Zoom call with Fred from the hub or somebody, and they're going to say, hey, Crystal, remember that thing you mentioned? How's it going? And I don't want to say, well, I haven't even touched it since the last time we talked. I want to be able to say, you know what? Maybe I only took half a step towards it, but here's the progress I'm making. So having accountability partners, no matter where they are in the world, is super important for everyone. So yes, find your people, find your tribe. I have been lucky enough to be able to have a tribe that even though they're not in my country, they are easily accessible and willing to help out in any manner. So thank you for that, Lou, because I can't even put into words properly on this podcast how different my life is now than it was in 2016 when I came to that first momentum. And the people that I know and the relationships that I've formed with people. I mailed out, people on the podcast listening know, I mailed out almost 200 Christmas cards this year.
Wow.
Because I sent one to every member of the hub who I have had personal contact with. I sent one to every person who has meant something to me, because it doesn't matter who they are or how they come into your life. There is a lesson you can learn from everyone.
That is incredibly impressive. And I love the personal touch that you sending a card. It's easy to send an email. It's easy to send a text. It's even easy to pick up the phone, but sitting down and handwriting a card, there's a lost romantic art to it. So bravo to you.
Thank you. I 100% agree. And it's one of the reasons why I try to do Christmas cards every year is I think especially in this digital world that we're living in, we've gotten so far removed from that personal moment. So for you listening to the podcast, you guys can't see it, but Lou can. Behind me, there is 2 strings of Christmas cards. Every time I get one back in the mail, even if it just says, Merry Christmas, love so-and-so, I know that person has taken a couple of minutes out of their day, their very busy, chaotic, crazy day, to think of me and write their name in a card. And I give them an honorary place on my wall for a couple of months because it's that important. So if you got a card, congratulations. If you haven't, it just means I haven't met you yet, but we will meet at some point, and I'm sure you will get one as well.
I love it.
So I want to be pretty respectful of your time, Lou. So I don't want to keep you too long, but I do want to ask you a couple of questions that I tend to ask people who join me here on the podcast. But before I get to those 3 questions, I have a question for you personally. Because I've known you as long as I have, I want to know if you could personally give one piece of advice to anyone who's listening about any aspect of life. What would that personal piece of advice be?
Oh, gosh.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
No, it's okay. And this is, I don't want this to sound like a cop-out answer, but just start. You need to just start. Whatever that thing is that you want to do, I understand the fear and the trepidation and the anxiety and the time and all the reasons and excuses that we have and that we can make for not doing something. But that thing that has been gnawing away at you, and I think that we probably all have one, right? That project you want to start, that craft you want to make, that book you want to write, that blog that you want, that message you want to feel like you want to get out there. Stop waiting for the perfect time, because it's never going to come, right? Just get started and you will improve over time. Not all the pieces don't necessarily have to be in place, and it does not have to be perfect. That's the beauty of humanity, is that, that's why I love live video, right? Because it is so, it is the most authentic medium, because there's no pause button. Let's not do that. Let's do this one again. Let's edit this out. It's just as genuine as it can be, which is the beauty of it.
That is a great piece of advice. And I will tell you, listening to this podcast, it's something Lou has touted as advice for a number of years. A couple of years ago, Lou did a special retreat weekend for Momentum that was a very intimate group of, I believe there was about 10 of us. Is that correct, Lou?
Yep.
And it was
by design, just 10.
Right. Because you wanted this to be not just personal, but meaningful to everybody who showed up as an entrepreneur. And at that particular event, one of the things Lou had said to me, because I had barely started chasing happiness, it was a podcast and a blog and not much else. And one of the things Lou said to me at that event is, you have to take the leap. You have to believe that what message you're trying to get out there needs to be heard. People will listen, and you can do this. And so, as crazy as it felt at the time, I jumped in the swimming pool fully clothed on the Sunday morning of this weekend, which is both one of my most terrifying memories, but also one of my greatest joys, because it really was that moment of just start, even if it's a disaster, which certain things with chasing happiness have been along the way, and you learn and you grow and you adapt as you go. It is so important to just try.
And the fact that you did that, and for you, the listener, might not understand the importance of that and the meaning of that, not just for you, but for me, for everybody that was there, for everybody that watched the video of you doing it, because it wasn't like, oh, let's be silly and jump in the pool. It was indicative of the leap of faith that you were taking. And You know what? You're not going to learn how to swim if you don't just get in the darn pool. So you just got in the darn pool. And of all the moments, not just from that weekend, but from all the retreats, it's one that really sticks out to me, because you did what a lot of people sometimes are afraid to do or can't do or overthink too much. And I love the fact that you did it. I think that was a very freeing moment for you.
It absolutely was. And I will tell you, Lou, so that happened on the Sunday morning, and we sort of disbanded around lunchtime on Sunday. I got in a car and headed back to the airport to fly home to Canada. And in the back of my car, I texted my best friend at the time, and I sent her a picture of it because you took a picture and there was a video being taken. And so I sent her a picture and said, "This is what I just did." And she messaged me back all in capital letters, "Oh my God, I cannot believe you just did that. Congratulations." And we had this, I cried on the way back to the airport. We had this deep conversation about how symbolic that was of what the next chapter of my life was going to be. And I didn't know it at the time. You saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. And that literally opened a door that I never could have imagined walking through. So yes, it was very symbolic. It was very emotional. And it will forever be one of those moments for you listening on the podcast. I have created a GIF of it, and I will share it on our social media platforms. It was absolutely symbolic of this next chapter of my life and what it has been. So thank you for that, Lou.
That was all you. That was all you. I just was able to watch it happen.
You held my hand through the process, and I appreciate that. I definitely needed it at the time, so thank you.
We all need it. We all need a little bit of hand holding, and it's okay. You know what, too? It's okay to ask for help.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people struggle because we live in this world that tells us we should have it all together.
Right.
I'm going to be 40 in January, and most people who are my age are married. They own a house. They have kids. And for my 40th birthday, I'm taking a picture with a little card that says I'm 40 and I'm not married and I don't have kids and I don't own a house. And that's all okay. So it doesn't matter who you are, how old you are, where you find yourself in life. None of us survives this completely alone. You do need help sometimes. You do need someone to hold your hand. So it's great to have people like Lou in your life who you can go to when you need it.
And just remember, every picture that you see on Instagram of the perfect life is probably not real. That's not what real life looks like. So you worry about, I always tell people, like, put your blinders on, you go do you stay in your own lane and do the things that make you happy, and don't worry about what anybody else is doing or any other race that they're in. Things happen for you, at your own pace and at the right time.
Which is so important for everyone. And one of the wonderful lessons, Lou, that you give to people when you talk to them is don't pay attention to the numbers. As an entrepreneur, it can be hard not to get sucked into the numbers game because you're constantly looking at SEO and you're constantly looking at how many hits a post got and how many people listened to a podcast episode. And so to not pay attention to the numbers and just know what you're doing is making a difference. Maybe right now only to one person in the whole world, but to that one person in the whole world, you are the world. So it does matter.
You actually misunderstood me. What I did say was it's all about the numbers. That's all you should be focusing on, Crystal. You've been doing this backwards the whole time. You're right. It's not about the numbers. I tell you this all the time. I never check my numbers because I don't care. Because it's about the one person that you're speaking to. And if you can impact in a positive way one other person's life, man, there's a ripple effect to that. Like the stone in the water the pebble in the water, there's a huge ripple effect. And that's what we should be striving for, instead of like worrying about the vanity metrics of how many likes, follows, shares, tweets, whatever. Who cares? Who cares how many hearts you have on your stupid Instagram picture? How have you positively impacted somebody?
Right. Which is just so foreign to so many people because of the world we live in now today. And I think it's such an important message. So I'm glad that you're preaching it. I'm glad that people like myself and other people who are in the hub and a part of your community and your clubhouse can preach it as well, because I think we will all be a lot happier when we get to a place where we're far more concerned with how we're impacting the world rather than how many people like our imaginary social media life.
So I'm laughing because I came off stage at a conference once, very quickly. I came off stage at a conference and I was chatting with a number of people, which is the most wonderful and humbling thing. If you come off stage and there's people talking to you afterwards, you hopefully, you can feel good about the job you did. And some guy like literally was like waiting, like he was sort of holding back until the end. And we're chatting a little bit and he like looks around. He's like, all right, so, I know you said in your presentation, like you don't care about the numbers, but seriously, man, like how many downloads do you get a week? And I was like, no, man, like I don't know. He's like, come on, it's just me and you. Like, just really, how many? Like, because you have to check. And he was like getting almost mad and frustrated. I'm like, dude, I really don't know because I really don't care. Like, that's not my barometer of success. Do you have this many or this? I would even give like a range, like, because it doesn't make a difference.
So true. And such a great story, because it just inevitably we live in this world that does care about the numbers. And so it's hard not to get sucked in. And just as a side note, I'll share a personal story. A few weeks ago, I had logged in to upload a new podcast episode, and there was this huge spike on Libsyn, which is the service I use, that showed, this one day, almost 100 podcasts had been downloaded. And I sort of stopped because it was the biggest spike I had seen on my chart. And I was like, I don't understand what's happening here. How do I figure out what happened? Did something go wrong? And I posted to Lou and all of my friends in the hub. And I was like, how do I figure out what's going on here? And Lou came in and said, don't pay attention to the numbers. Here's where you can go to find out specifically what they were, but don't get too distracted by the numbers. And he was right. There was this one anomaly day, and regardless of what happened that day, it doesn't matter, because 71 people or 71 episodes or whatever it was were being heard by someone. And hopefully at least one of those episodes had an impact. And that's the thing that was important. So thank you for reminding us of those things.
And too, when I say don't focus on number, and I, as an extension of that, I always say to you and other people, people will go, well, I only had 71 downloads. Like, don't get rid of that number. Like, get rid of that word only out of your vocabulary. One, because 71 is a meaningful number. And if you don't think so, I say all the time, like, imagine 71 people showing up to your house on Sunday night, like knocking on your door and like, hey, I want to sit in your living room and hear what you have to say for an hour. Like, you're like, wow, because there's 71 souls. There are 71 real people giving you their most valuable commodity, which is their time.
Yeah. Which is huge. And I think because we live in the world we do, we forget those people are people. You are listening to this podcast right now. You are a human being who is devoting however long this podcast ends up being
of
your day towards listening to Lou and I have this conversation. And we're all busy people. You could be doing whatever else you want to with that time. So we appreciate and value the fact that you're sharing it with us. And I can't imagine 71 people sitting in my living room. So that's a wonderful visual for us all to carry forward. So because I do want to be respectful of your time, Lou, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I try to ask everybody. And the first one is, what exactly does happiness mean to you?
You're so smart. God, that's a great question. Like, we use that word all the time and we never probably sit down to define it for ourselves. And I think over time, my definition of happiness has changed. Today, right now, it's, how do I feel when I get up in the morning, and how do I feel when I put my head down? Do I have a sense of pride? Did I do the best for myself and for other people? But as I get older, happiness starts to translate into a legacy. What am I leaving behind? Are the footprints that I'm making not in the sand today, but in the cement, because that we leave behind us? If God forbid, I don't wake up tomorrow. Am I proud of the things that I have done in the 24 hours and the weeks and the months and the years behind me?
That is such a great answer. And it is one of the reasons why I ask people that question, because so often we're told what happiness should be, but we don't actually stop to evaluate it for ourselves to say, today my definition might be different than tomorrow, and that's okay. But if in this moment I can say, yes, this is what it is, then I'm all the better for trying to achieve that. So thank you for answering that, Lou. The next question is, if you could go back in time and tell your younger self one thing about your life at any point in your life, what would it be?
Stay away from insert girl's name here. Don't do it. Just keep driving. Don't stop if I could tell myself, it's hard because you try and think of those moments like, oh, because of this bad thing happened. And this is going to be a lame answer too, so I'm going to apologize in advance. I would tell myself to just, I don't mean to use the Walt quote, but like keep moving forward. Like I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't warn myself or anything, because everything I've experienced, good and bad, has shaped me into the person that I am. And, who I am is who I am. I wouldn't want to, not to sort of use an old Popeye quote, but I am what I am, right? Who I am today has been shaped by all the decisions that I've made. But I would remind myself that everything does happen for a reason, and just, keep doing what you're doing and stay true to your beliefs, and don't ever let anybody distract you from them.
I love that answer. And part of the reason I love that answer is when people have asked me that question, my response has always been, I wouldn't go back, because then I wouldn't have learned the lesson that was necessary for me to move forward and be who I am today. And it sounds similar to sort of my thought process. So probably explains a little bit why you and I are friends, but people who think alike tend to gravitate towards each other. And I love that response. So for you listening, rewind, go back, hit that 30-second button and just listen to Lou's response again, because it's so important that we not live in the regret of the moments that we had in the past, but that we learn the lessons, that we keep moving forward to become whoever it is that we're going to be today, tomorrow, and 10 years from now.
Can I change my answer completely? I wait. No,
you
I
absolutely can.
So forget everything I just said. I would go back and be like, Lou, psst, come here. Go buy Microsoft and Apple stock, like a lot of it. And just, that's what
right?
I would tell
Invest in the Disney Vacation Club in like
this
the
Amazon
early 90s.
Thing. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. All of the things we could have learned, right?
Right.
So my last question for you is, for anybody listening to this podcast, regardless of whether or not they want to be an entrepreneur, whether or not they love Disney, what's one thing that you would tell them to carry with them for the rest of their life? The best piece of advice you've ever been given, maybe, or the worst, whatever it is.
Wow. There's a lot of gravitas in that question, right? Cause you think I'm sort of playing back all the advice that I've given. And a lot of it came from my dad, and my mom, who at the time were like, oh, come on, that's stupid. And I'm like, oh, I get it now. Cause I'm somewhat of an adult. This is a lot of pressure, because you're like, it's this pressure of passing on this, life impacting advice.
Well, no pressure, but
buy Microsoft and Apple.
You can always change your mind later.
Right.
It's all good.
Buy Microsoft and Apple. No, I think it very much is in alignment with what we've been talking about. Don't worry about what other people are doing or what other people think about you. Look, as somebody who, left a career in law to go talk about Mickey Mouse, there was a lot of people who did not believe in what I was doing, and said to me, friends that I've knew for decades, said to my face, I give you 6 months and you'll be back begging for a job, which, and I think we all sort of have those moments where, there are naysayers and people that don't believe, or maybe are jealous in what you're doing. Walt had them. We have them on an individual basis, both large and small.
Right.
But stick to your beliefs.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Lou. I very much appreciate it. I can't imagine my life without you in it at this point. So I am grateful to be able to share your wisdom and your joy with all of the people in the Chasing Happiness community.
Oh, thank you. I love and appreciate you so much. And those are not words I just sort of throw out, randomly. You are a very special person. I've told you this for a long, long time. And I know that the best is still yet to come for you. And I cannot wait to watch it happen.
Oh, thank you. See, I am going to cry.
Oh, I want a hug. Give me a hug. I need a hug.
That's the thing that I'm missing in this world right now is hugs. I don't know you listening to this podcast, whether or not you're a hugger, but oh my gosh, I miss hugs so much.
Yeah, I'm having the shakes from lack of hugs, believe me.
We will all hug soon in person. Thank you so much to Lou for joining me here on the podcast today. I cannot put into words just how much this man has changed my life, how much his friendship means to me. I hope you found our conversation today not just informative and entertaining at times, but valuable. There was so many things that on a regular basis, Lou and I talk about that I think the whole world could benefit from in some way, shape, or form. So be sure to check out his website, both loumongello.com as well as wdwradio.com. I will put links to both of those in the show notes. This is our first podcast of 2021. So happy New Year to each and every one of you. If you guys have any questions or comments about this podcast or about any of the podcasts that you've been listening to, please feel free to contact me at info@chasinghappiness.ca. Of course, you can reach out to me on social media, but I also want to let you know in the show notes, I have included a link to our new Patreon page. A lot of you have reached out to me and said, we love the podcast. We love what you're doing. How can we help? And right now, I don't really know what that looks like because Chasing Happiness has been something that I've sort of devoted most of my life over the past few years and more time, especially in 2020, towards. So in the process of trying to figure out how you can contribute, how you as a community can come together and be supportive of everything that we're doing collectively as a community, whether it's this podcast, whether it's the book club, whether it's the 12 days of giveaways around the holiday season. I thought for now the best way to be able to do that was through our Patreon page. So you can hop over to Patreon, you can become a member of that particular community, and you can contribute in whatever way you're comfortable with. So I appreciate you guys for asking. I appreciate and love each and every one of you for listening to this podcast. Please go back and listen to Lou's advice again at some point. If you're struggling, if you're having a hard day, if there's something that you just don't feel like you have support in your local area, whether that be from friends and family or someone else, please reach out to Lou. Please reach out to me, and we would be happy to support you in any way that we can. I hope you guys had a wonderful holiday season. I know it looked very, very different than any holidays that we've had before, but I hope it was still filled with love and light. And cheers to a 2021 that shows us all collectively as a world turning a corner and being able to come back together in our communities, in our families, with our friends, and be able to sort of get back to a life that is meaningful and includes other people in person. Have a great week, everybody. Again, thank you, Lou, for joining me this week. I cannot think of enough nice things to say about you. I miss you. I cannot wait to be able to join you down in Florida or anywhere else that you happen to be having an event. Hopefully 2021, I will be able to see you in person and give you a real life hug. Have a great week, guys, and I will chat with you next week. Bye for now.